To Cuelist tutorials. This tutorial is going to be on editing queue properties and queue attributes. You'll notice right here that I've added a queue to our script, and we'll go over how to do that later on in a different tutorial. But for now, I wanted to have it just as an example. I want to talk about the different parts of every queue. Over here, we have our queue title box. This really carries all the information of the queue. Then we have what we call the queue leader line and the queue box, and this really indicates where the queue is called. And when we get into queues, you'll see there's a couple different ways that we can indicate where the queue should be called. But for now, we're going to leave it right here. When we create a layer, which we've done in a previous tutorial, you can see we made our layer and we titled that layer LX. That title is going to appear in every queue, and it is going to be there regardless of any options that we push. If we change the name of our layer, it will immediately change it on all queues. But today we're going to look at what it means to edit the queue properties. So we're going to click into our layer, and keep in mind this is done on a layer by layer basis. As before, we can change the color, we can change the title of the layer, but now we're going to look at editing queue properties. So we're going to open that menu, and we're going to see a lot of options here on editing queue properties. The first property we're going to find is this option for our queue placement, and this is the default option of where the queue is going to be placed when we put it on the page. Right now you can see our default is the right side of the page, and you can see that our queue is going to line up with the right side of the page. If we choose instead to put our default as the left side of the page, the queue will move to the other side. You can make this choice on a layer by layer basis, so you can have one layer of queues on the right and one layer of queues on the left. It's also important to note that all of the choices here, the queue placement, the queue size, the resizable box opacity, and the queue line opacity, are unique to every user. So if you choose to put your queues on the right, another user may have their queues on the left. It won't impact your options. The only thing that is universal to every user is this box right here, or the indication of where the queue is in the script. So we're going to keep our queues on the right. The next thing we have is the queue size, and this really makes the size of the whole queue title box larger or smaller, and we can control this universally for every queue. We can also control it on a queue by queue basis. The same is true for any of these. So in a different tutorial, we'll go over and show you how you can go into an individual queue and change any of this information. The resizable box opacity is the opacity of the color inside the box. So if we turn that to 0, we're just going to have a box around it. If we turn it all the way up, we are now going to have a fully opaque box. So that's really a personal preference, whatever you like. Queue line opacity also here is just this leader line, and we can make that as dark or as light as you like. Now we're going to talk about attributes in a second, but I want to go to the bottom of this list, because there's one other thing that is available in our queue, and this is again on a user by user basis, but we can choose what is visible in the queue. Right now we have the number and title chosen. We can click the label, and that will also put in a label and allow us to drop a label into the queue. We can have either number and title or label or both. You can't have nothing in your queue. So one or the other is going to be listed. If you turn off the number and title, the information is still there. It's carried with the queue. You can always bring it back at any time. Okay, now let's talk about attributes. What are attributes? Well, attributes allow us to put information inside the queue, and you'll notice that that information is tied to a few different common theatrical consoles that we might see, and those are lighting consoles. This is information from the ETC electronic theater controls lighting consoles, and then we have some sound information, and that's connected to the options that are often found in QLab. If we select any of these items or all of them, they will now appear inside the queue, and when we go and look at the queue in a little bit, you'll see what I mean by that. But we can turn off any or all of them. We can turn on a few of them. All of this information is in the queue. Again, you have the option to show it. If you turn it off, but you've put information in there, the information is not removed, it will always be there. So typically we're going to have our lighting cues with probably some of this lighting information, sound cues over here we could put in with sound information in a different layer. We also have a number of categories for props. If you find it of use, you can track your props in a script just like you do with your cues. Just click on any prop and you can add these categories and keep track of your props. The beautiful thing about cues that we'll see later on is that while you're dropping them into your PDF, they are also accumulating in a spreadsheet format. So for props, it gives you an opportunity to immediately go through a script, mark it up, and then have a spreadsheet with all of your cues. At the bottom of this list of attributes, you're going to find 4 user-defined attributes. If you select any of these user-defined attributes, you can give them a title. So for instance, if I want to title this one Follow Spot 1, now this attribute will appear in the queue as into the category of Follow Spot 1. And that allows us to track other things that maybe aren't part of the lighting console or just an item that you feel like you'd like to track. Okay, so that's all for queue properties and queue attributes. In our next tutorial, we're going to look at node properties and get an understanding of exactly what those are. Okay, thanks for watching.